welcome Mr. Matthew Hayes.
So many familiar faces, unbelievable. There's no place like home. And it's just weird. Like, that was Flashback. And that was The Roost. Remember the things we got into there? I can't describe all of it because some of it still isn't legal, some of the things I did.
Welcome to Flash Forward. This is the featurette to explain how and why we made the film Flashback. I'm Peter Hayes, the producer-director of the film, and this is my brother Matt.
I'm Matthew Hayes, and I'm about 5 years younger than Pete, and we grew up in the suburb of Windsor Park in Edmonton.
We did.
We survived.
We did survive. And, Flashback has taken us back to Edmonton. And because I live in Calgary now, you live in Montreal. And, since Mom left, there hasn't been as many reasons to go up and see our friends in Edmonton. So it's been really cool, actually, to get back up there.
It's been very interesting. And, of course, Flashback always was a trip. And now in nostalgia, through the lens of nostalgia, it's even more of a trip. I mean, it wasn't a utopia, but there was a lot of really vibrant, wonderful memories, and there's also a lot of kind of dark times I had there. So it's like a really interesting thing to go back and explore.
But then the question is, well, how do you tell a story about a ghost? Because Flashback's been long gone. It's been gone for 40 years, 35, 40 years since it was at the 4th Street location. And so everything had disappeared. And really, there was no physical evidence of it, so it's hard to do a documentary about something where you can't show what you're telling about.
Flash nightclub was like a rite of passage. If you were hit, that's where you went.
Weekend nights, the lineup at Flashback was something to be seen in and of itself.
We usually crammed 400 or 500 people in there because you didn't want the lineup going all the way around the block with people fighting outside to get in.
I remember going to Flashback for the first time because Greg Adams took me. And I think the first time I went to Flashback, I met Allison. And, we were just inseparable for years after that. And we would go to Flashback every weekend.
For dancing, for me, Flashback was the place to go.
And we would dance with our friends, and it was cool. Like, it was gay, straight, didn't matter. We all had fun together. And it was just a place to meet people and a place to dance and a place to have fun.
And I think looking back at the timeline, when I examine it, I think you were probably, I went in there when I was 16 with friends, but I didn't go back regularly till I was like probably 18, 19, 20. I think you were probably going there before I was.
We were, and we had so much fun. And it's funny because you think, well, what are you doing going to a gay bar? But Flashback was for everybody. If you were tolerant of people, and you wanted to have fun, and you didn't want to have aggro, because there was a lot of testosterone floating around in the bars in those days. And if you met a girl, they would threaten you and say, they would think, if I beat you up, I can have the girl, which was kind of an odd idea. But that seemed to be kind of prevalent. So it was a safe place. The music was amazing, and it was just an awesome place.
Yeah, I think it was probably the first time I thought, wow, my brother Pete is really cool. He's going to Flashback and he's with Allie.
Well, I'm glad I was cool. I think Allie made me cool. I do recall that. I think I was there in the early 80s and you were there in the later 80s, kind of. And I think that that's what made it such an interesting idea, as let's make a film about this thing that we both had experiences at and both really took a lot away from. I really benefited from John Reed's club.
In the party circuit, Flashback's reputation had grown well beyond Alberta's borders. It was a known club in LA, San Francisco, New York, and London.
I visited New York. I was in Toronto sometimes. Occasionally, you would run into people and go, oh, Flashback. And that's when I knew it was like, this is something pretty big.
So you remember how we came up with the idea for Flashback?
I remember that you and I had spent time there together, and I had spent time with Allie and lots of different friends. And I thought, that's really interesting that in a place that I really did feel was a very homophobic place growing up there, that Flashback brought people together. And you immediately said, that's great. you know, I really like that idea. We should take that to Telus right away.
Yeah, because I mean, I loved Flashback. You love Flashback. So what better story for us to do for something that was a commonplace? And really, that's the joy of what Flashback was. It was an inclusive space before people talked about inclusivity.
In a city like Edmonton, there isn't a gay scene big enough to support an all-male bar or an all-lesbian bar or an all-S&M bar or whatever it is. So that melting pot morality that we had going on at Flashback didn't really exist in Toronto in the same way that cool straight people didn't come to the gay club to discover how to have fun.
It was kind of like a family. Everybody was just, like, if you knew, you knew.
The thing also about Flashback was the energy. And we wanted to be able to show the energy that was there. And so to do that with people talking about how great the club was, that's not enough. You've got to show it. And so Rob Rowski, who runs Evolution Wonder Lounge, which is the last gay bar in Edmonton, I reached out to him and I said, Rob, you know, we need a space because we're going to shoot reenactments. And he just said, sure, what do you need? And just so generous and so helpful. And so we went there and did auditions with, if you don't mind my saying, club kids of today. We used to call ourselves club kids, so, you know. But, you know, people in their 20s and young people, and we said, you know, we're doing this reenactments for this film about Flashback, and they were so excited about it because they're interested in what was the 80s like. And some of them, you know, their parents have told them, their parents used to go to Flashback, a lot of that. But also, they've seen stories about the 80s, and they know it's their history, but queer history hasn't been told in an appropriate way or in a full way. And so there's a lot of questions about, you know, what was it like? And of course, AIDS knocked out so many of the people who would be telling those stories today that there's a real gap.
Gonna layer it up a little bit and take a little bit of the length off too.
We managed to bring in hair, makeup, wardrobe people who all had a Flashback connection.
Valerie and Mandy.
Valerie and Mandy and Christian Ponto from Baby O's, and they did our hair.
You aren't sensitive to scent at all, are you?
No.
Now for the best part. We're known for our shampoos, people.
Yeah.
Valerie and Mandy were staples of Flashback, and so was Christian was there a lot, and then Douglas Cressman, who did makeup for us, he was doing drag down in Calgary and would come up for weekends and party at Flashback, so he was perfect. And then also Rosalind Lazaruk, who went to the 5th Street location, but she was the kid sister of a woman who used to go to Flashback and the Roost a lot.
Hi, I'm Rosalind Lazaruk, and I did all the wardrobe for the Flashback documentary reenactment. And
so she grew up, you know, wanting to go to this club and managed to catch the last, you know, gasp of Flashback in 1991 when she was finally old enough to go. So all the people working hair, makeup, wardrobe were people who went to Flashback. And that connection between them and the kids they were working with to get them ready, things like that kept happening.
Yeah.
Where, you know, people would hear about it and say, how can I help? And then what we did was we took Evolution and turned it into Flashback. We put in the old club, you know, Studio 54 checkered floor. We painted some flats. Brianna Kalibaba did the set design for us, did a fabulous job. We made old money and set up the bar in a similar way. And
fake cigarettes.
Lots of fake cigarettes, stubby bottles.
Everyone smoked. I mean, it was incredible. People were just smoking and drinking on the dance floor. It was a different time.
It was.
We were on our way home, and we were walking down the street, stoned out of our minds, and suddenly this van pulled up beside us. And we were like, and Lulu just went, keep walking. Don't make eye contact. We just ran for it. And that's where they caught up to us.
We needed a car that was a menacing, you know, bad guy car that was, you know, following people or menacing them outside of the club. And I worked on a car show years ago, and I thought of Steve Sang, who had this beaten up old station wagon and really looked perfect as this menacing car. And it turned out that, so I found Steve on Facebook and I said, do you still have that car? And he's like, and I said, you know, can we, you know, use that for this film we're doing? And he said, well, I used to go to Flashback. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And then he said, look, I'm also a casting director. So we needed a cast. I said, well, how about you be a casting director? And so he said, sure, I'll be your casting director. And he threw in the car.
I'm Steve Sang from Edmonton, Alberta. I am one of the 80s involved in Flashback documentary, and it's close to my heart because it was one of the first clubs I went to as a young lad. It was accepting not of just of LGBTQ plus people, but of anyone that didn't fit in Edmonton, Alberta, which was very conservative, very redneck, and you know, if your face was a different color, or maybe if you had a mohawk, you know, you were not welcome at any one of the clubs around Edmonton, and so it wasn't just a safe haven for queer folk. It was a safe haven for anyone that didn't fit in and that wanted to party at Flashback.
So back in the day, there'd be a matchbook because everybody smoked, and it would, you know, tell you the club name, and then inside it says name, address, phone number, which the idea was that if you met somebody you liked, they could write down their name, address, phone number, and you could find them later if you happen to get separated. But you had a different interpretation.
Well, it was obviously pre-Grindr. People can't imagine now without the internet what it was like. No Facebook, no Instagram. So if you met somebody in a club, yeah, this was the way to do it. But I remember the first time I saw this at Flashback, I must have been like 17 or 18, and I saw this and I thought, you know, gay people are so nice. Like, they're so sweet. Like, this means if you lose your matches, people can return them to you. And that's what I thought this was.
Yeah, well.
So it was pretty hilarious. It shows how naive I was.
The music. It was a thing that was so important at the club, and you had an idea for a song that you felt would really be, because there's so much music in the 80s, and there's so much, you know, disco music, and well, what song should we choose, knowing that we probably only had budget to license one, and you knew which one that should be.
Yeah, So Many Men, So Little Time. I mean, the song was about all the opportunities to have sex with lots of different men, which was what, you know, sexual revolution was about, especially for gay men. You know, and then as AIDS moved in, the meaning shifted, but then we were losing so many men to AIDS. But it remains a very catchy disco song, and it really is emblematic of that era. It really reflects that era very well. So I thought it was a good one. And then what I was so impressed with was that you found Dorje.
It was amazing that Ian Dillon, our music producer, found Dorje, who is just perfect as you know, this powerhouse diva singer who could bring the same power and quality to the song as Michael Brown, who made it a hit originally, and who, by the way, was, you know, from Montreal and lived in Vancouver. So there's a, you know, Canadian connection to the disco song.
I like it. There's just a bit of dirt in the chain on the Every Night coming through a bit.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's a lot of power.
Make it really clean for you.
Cool, here we go.
And it was just amazing to be able to record it at the National Music Centre, which is one of the great facilities for recording music in Canada, if not the world. And so having that as part of the film was really fun. And of course, we've made a little 12-inch single of the two songs that we recorded on the day that are the soundtrack for the film.
A good direction there?
Yeah, I'm pumped.
Good, yay.
Peter?
Very good.
And you didn't skimp on the cowbells. Smart move.
Well, no. I think that's my big contribution, was I said more cowbell. But also the second song, which is Don't Stop Dancing, came from our thought about what the message of Flashback is, which is that despite the bad things that might happen in life, don't stop dancing. You know, just keep your chin up.
We needed footage of the old drag shows, and it must have been 15 or 20 years ago. I had an exchange with a guy in Calgary who used to work at Flashback. It was Patrick Monahan sent me this DVD with an hour and a half of a compilation of all these old drag shows, some of which I remembered had seen, and it was great. But then I reached out to him because we started the Flashback documentary, and he was really instrumental in getting us in touch with other people and telling us about the history of the club and talking, because he was an insider, and talking to John Reed. Patrick was really, really instrumental and so helpful and great in getting the contacts we needed to get to make the documentary.
In those days, pulling out a camera in a bar was like, it was illegal in some bars. It wasn't something you did in Alberta, far less a gay club. So the fact that they had the drag shows and Patrick said, I should be filming this, and started that whole process, led to us being able to find archival material from Patrick, and then later from Darren and Twiggy, who had kept these tapes and kept these still photographs, because that really shows us what the club was. And the great thing about that is we were able to go to Darren's house, for example, and look at all this amazing archival material that he had, and quite the trove, not only at his house, but also because he's got so much that he also has a garage on the other side of town that's full of all the things from Guys in Disguise and all the posters and so on.
And if you look here, I'm actually buying broccoli from a Hutterite lady, which is fantastic. The look on her face is great. This outfit is all cat eyes and no makeup, which is hilarious. That's always a good look. Oh, here's Donna Milne kissing Tallulah's boob. Oh, and there's me behind the bar in my overalls showing off my nipples. Back in the day.
Fortunately, Darren doesn't throw anything away. And so one of the things that he generously gave me was swizzle sticks that came from Flashback. And the thing that's really cool about these swizzle sticks is the story behind them. Because what happened was that early on in the club's history, somebody ordered swizzle sticks, and they ordered like cases instead of, you know, boxes of swizzle sticks, cases of swizzle sticks. So they had these boxes and boxes and boxes of swizzle sticks in the back of Flashback, which they were desperately trying to give away with. 10 years later, when the club closed, they still had unopened boxes of swizzle sticks. I know, they're amazing, right? And so anyway, so that's super fun.
So the upper ceiling and the floors for where the club was sitting on were all wood.
And wood is one of the best sound carriers, and it worked out to be beautifully accommodating to everything that we wanted to do.
What just gave me goosebumps on my goosebumps was when you showed me the 3D footage that recreated the actual physical space. I mean, that really was, I mean, thank God for 3D imaging, because it really brought back what the space was like.
Yeah, so my pal Justin Thompson is a really talented 3D artist, graphic, 3D rendering artist, and he, I provided him with old photos and some footage, and he was able to actually clean up the photos and see what the structure of the building was like.
Well, the first thing I need is as many reference photos as I can get. We have the building here, and based off of these measurements, you can see them here, sizes in feet or centimeters. I try and scale the blueprint in the software based off of that width. So I'll add everything up, and then this plane is basically the size it should be based off of these calculations. I will draw a floor to cover up. You can see these walls are just they're just cubes that are stuck in there. The nice thing is it is a club, so unless the house lights are on, everything's nice and dark. So you can hide a bunch of things in the background that nobody's really gonna see.
We now can see what the club looked like from the inside, so it's great to be able to recreate that and fly from the dance floor up into the DJ booth where Mikey was hanging out and the other DJs, and see what that world was like as well.
Since the DJ booth is so much smaller, we can get into all fine details. We can put cables hanging, we can put extra records lying around, garbage on the floor. We have our posters, we have our electronics, little notes, our speakers, lights, insulation. So this amp rack, I had one picture, and then what I did is I modeled, I went into the image where the cylinder should be, where the volume knob should be, and I just placed a cylinder on top of it. And in Photoshop, I went in and looked at where the lights should be, the LED lights, and they're just a bunch of pills. The biggest challenge of the DJ booth was stopping, because it was my favorite part to do.
Friends we knew were all of a sudden getting very sick, getting very thin.
And it was coming out of New York and San Francisco.
We heard about it long before it actually hit here.
Our mom, Helen Hayes, was running the palliative care unit over at the Grey Nuns Hospital, and then when AIDS happened, you know, she started working with AIDS patients, and the issue there was that her palliative patients that had a full life for the most part were dying in their 80s and 90s sometimes, and these young men were coming in dying. And there was this huge disconnect between young men who were dying and old people who were dying. There was a lot of fear around AIDS.
Yeah.
And so, but also the young people were resentful of dying in their 20s when they could see other people around them who'd had, you know, another 60 years of life before it was coming to an end. And then she started working with Michael Fair.
I first met Michael Fair because when I was on the executive of Gaylock, which was gay and lesbians on campus at U of A, I invited him to come and speak, to give a talk about safe sex. So it was like only probably about 15, maybe 20 students who came, but he talked very eloquently and was very funny and charming and talked about safe sex practices and what that were. He was always willing. If you called Michael, he was always willing to come and do things. And you know, he had formed the AIDS Network of Edmonton. He'd had to rent it out of his apartment because no one would rent him space. So he was a real champion. And then I was writing a lot for Extra, a fair bit of Extra from Edmonton. And I have to give them kudos because they were Toronto-based, but they were giving me space to write about what was going on in Alberta, which a lot of Toronto publications wouldn't do. And I interviewed Michael because he was running for city council. And then after I interviewed him, I realized, like, you know, he's a really good guy, and he was talking about a lot of really important things. Hot lunches for kids to make sure that lower income kids got a proper meal a day at least. You know, really talking about leveling the playing field for everybody, not just gay issues. He was really out there for everyone. So I went and joined his campaign, and I worked on his media advisory committee. And I'm really proud that I worked in his campaign because he did obviously get elected as the first out gay politician in Alberta. But in the meantime, Mom, of course, worked with him. She had been on the advisory committee for the AIDS Network of Edmonton. So we had him over for dinner, and you know, we became really friends with him, and she endorsed his campaign. And so it was really, we had a whole sorts of connections with Michael.
The neon sign was hanging up and lit up, and that blue glow was instantly welcoming, even inside the tiny entrance and the coat check. And I thought, oh, they spent a few bucks on this.
Interestingly, speaking to Darren Hagen, it's like, hey, guess what? The sign still exists. And that was sort of an idea for, well, maybe we can frame it around this finding the sign. The Alberta Sign Association and people like, you know, Eric and Tina and Mark, all these folks with the Sign Association were so helpful and arranged to restore the sign at expense.
We have the face now removed, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test the units of neon. This just illuminates the gas just enough for us to be able to test the unit to see if it works or not. So I'm going to plug in the transformer and see what happens. And sure enough, there's no power.
The sign almost becomes like another character in the film to me.
I think the sign is a character because the sign was so important as a sort of beacon of neon kind of fun in this gray world of Edmonton that, you know, there was the world outside of Flashback and the world inside Flashback, and those were very different things. And the sign was kind of right on that sort of entry line as you went into the club.
I just need to turn on my service switch here on my little makeup unit, just very temporarily to test the neon sign. You'd like to go, Peter, and take a look, see if it's lit.
Yeah, that's great.
And then, of course, how amazing that the Alberta Sign Association and all the folks who worked there helped us put the sign up.
So the Flashback sign is really that tangible connection to Edmonton's queer community and all the great contributions that community has made to Edmonton over the years.
Light it up! Light it up! Light it up! Light it up!
It actually shines neon light on the old 4th Street location, which is pure coincidence.
I know, it's eerie how close it is to where we used to hang out.
The 4th Street building itself was turned into a condominium, an upscale condominium. One of the people who came into audition, Christy McLean, said, you know, I manage the Excelsior lofts. So she introduced us to everybody at the Excelsior. So I said, well, we need someone to do catering. So she was our catering manager, and she helped us bridge the gap to meet all the people who live in the old 4th Street location today. And so all these connections kept happening. And you really got a feeling that the film was meant to be. And the owners and the people who own condos in the building were just over the moon when we approached them about the Flashback project, because they all love the fact that they live in the building that used to have Flashback in it. And so there's a lot of joy around that in that block with the Mercer Building folks and the folks from the Excelsior lofts. It was the first gay-owned business to go up on the side of a wall in the Neon Sign Museum. You know, maybe overdue, but it was great to see it on that day.
It was a big deal. It was really a lot of fun, and Ron Byers did a great job of emceeing, and I thought it was lovely. And Janice Irwin, she looked out at the crowd, and I thought what she said was beautiful.
A number of us elected officials who are part of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. I'm here. I'm queer, openly queer, because of the work of so many folks here in the crowd.
Tanzania temtik nitsegason, Tanzania temtik, just the Winnewak, nitsegason sipsis kipotaga ochinia. I want to bring greetings in my language. I was always told to introduce myself in my language. I'm Cree, I'm Nihio from the Alexander First Nation. I'm so proud to be joining not only our only ML gay, I'm glad to be another ML gay in our legislature.
It was a beautiful day.
Flashback changed Edmonton. It did, and it was one of the significant features of Edmonton, in some ways as significant as the Edmonton Oilers winning Stanley Cups and the West Edmonton Mall being the biggest mall in the world. Go figure, right? But you know, those things were significant as well, obviously, and in different ways. But when you look at the culture of Edmonton and how the culture was changing, and how Flashback was the center of so many different things that happened, from the Pisces raid to HIV, but also with the dance culture and disco, and where you went into a celebrity culture where everybody was celebrated. It wasn't just about being famous. It was about being celebrated because you were there.
I remember people distributing free condoms, and I remember safe sex information, and that was just really crucial, that information being out there, and Flashback was part of that.
It was. It wasn't just a dance bar. It was a place where, you know, at important moments the community would meet there and talk about what was happening and learn about what was happening, share information, and feel like they weren't alone.
I'm Gordon Feller, and I'm from Grand Prairie. What it meant to me, coming from a rural country farm boy, it introduced me to the world I knew that existed but didn't know, and it just created that everything feeling of acceptance and diversity and just enjoying everybody. It's the best place on earth.
I'm just so excited to be here and be a part of this queer history and just celebrate all of the movement that happened in the 80s, because it was such a cool, epic time with beauty and also pain, and it's just like everybody came together, and it's kind of very similar to now.
It's just really remarkable. It's been remarkable reconnecting with so many people here. It feels like the end of Wizard of Oz, right? Allie's here, Michael Fair's here, everyone's here, Darren and John Reed. It's so exciting. It's such an exciting project. We're really grateful to TELUS Originals for funding the film, and to ATB Financial for assisting us with the financing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make the film. And thanks to Darcy Green and Darren Hagen for taking care of this neon sign for 3 decades. That's why we still have it.
Really feels like a family project.
Yes.
And it's also been really fun to involve my son Henry, who did the graphic for the album cover.
Amazing job.
And also my daughter Greer, who is doing our publicity and running away with it on Instagram. And you know, you don't expect to have the opportunity in your life to work with, you know, your family in your business. And so it's very meaningful to me, and thanks
It's been
for all
beautiful.
of this.
It's
really
been
fun.
great. Thank
Yeah.
you.